Hey everyone, my name's Barbara, and I'm going to be doing my presentation on autism spectrum disorder. We're first going to take a look at our definition. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. Although autism can be diagnosed at any age, it is described as a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear in the first 2 years of life. Generally, this is when they appear, but that is not the case for every situation. Now we're going to take a look at the history of autism spectrum disorder. We are looking at some of the things that have happened in the U.S., but there are a few other studies I will be discussing that happened outside of the U.S. So the first thing we're going to start with is in the 17 and 1800s. So in the 1700s, it started with feral children being rumored to be running around with no supervision whatsoever, hence the term feral. And then the 1800s is when it was noted that they were being put in a training school. Now we're going to jump to 1943, where a man named Kanner did a study and described 11 children who were 8 boys and 3 girls who presented with inborn autistic disturbances of affective contact. Kanner is one of the first people who noticed autism. That's why one of the terms used to be called, in order to describe autism, Kanner's autism. That is where this term comes from. For autism, several important developments occurred during then 1960s and 1970s related to defining and diagnosing autism. Rimland created the first checklist for assessing symptoms suggestive of autism. So in the 60s and 70s, this is when there are checklists being made to assess individuals who have autism. So in 1971, a journal was established specifically for autism, and the editor was none other than Leo Kanner. The journal also included the words childhood schizophrenia, a term that was later dropped as it became increasingly clear that autism was a distinct condition in its own right. As a result of these considerations, the decision was made to include autism, or infantile autism, for the first time as an official diagnosis category in the groundbreaking third edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Now we are going in taking a look at some of the studies and whatnot being done outside of the United States. So this is, in 1979, Lorna Wing and Judith Gold examined the prevalence of autism as defined by Leo Kanner among children known to have special needs in the former London borough of Camberwell. They found a prevalence in those with IQ under 70 of nearly 5 per 10,000 for the syndrome, closely similar to the rate found by Lauder. So this is when some of the stereotypes will pop in about people thinking anyone who is mentally disabled has a lower IQ, especially with autistic individuals. That is definitely not the case. Everyone is different when it comes to any type of disability, so trying to put everything under an umbrella term can definitely hinder progress. Continuing history of autism spectrum disorder. So autism was included in the DSM-3 in an entirely new class of conditions. The pervasive developmental disorders. The definition provided for infantile autism in DSM-3 was true to the name of the disorder, emphasizing characteristics of young children. So infantile autism came out and it was automatically looked at with children in mind. Then we have what was called Asperger's syndrome from 93 to 1995. From the numbers of children they identified, they calculated a rate of 36 per 10,000 for those who definitely had Asperger's syndrome, and another 35 per 10,000 for those with social difficulties. So this time they did testing not just for Asperger's syndrome, but also for social difficulties in general, which is why they got about the same number. Autism spectrum disorder from 2005 to 2006. This is another study outside of the United States. Great Britain found a prevalence rate of 0.9% for autism, or 90 in 10,000. These were not separated into autism, Asperger's syndrome, or other profiles on the autism spectrum. This is when cultural differences can make a huge wave because everyone's culture is completely different. Something that, American culture might look at as odd is not odd in another culture. Like, one of the things that people with autism very much have issues with is they can't look people directly in the eyes. So when they're having a conversation and they're not looking you in the face, a lot of people will find that disrespectful. So they'll look and tell them that they need to be looking them in the face. This makes them extremely uncomfortable, and a lot of the times they can't do it. In other cultures, like Asian cultures, like Japanese culture, you don't actually look at your elders. You usually kind of keep, your eyes down to the floor, and you bow to show that, you're grateful, and it's just common decency. So, cultural perspective definitely has a huge effect when it comes to autism, even now. Continuing history. So, this is Autism Spectrum 2005 to 2006. Gillian Baird and her colleagues published a report of a prevalence study which surveyed a population of children aged 9 through 10 in South Thames region. All children who either already had an autism diagnosis or had social and communication difficulties were selected for screening. Children considered to be at risk of being an undetected case because they had a statement of special educational needs were also selected. Autistic adults. The Adult Psychiatry Morbidity Survey is the primary data source for monitoring trends in England's mental health. In 2007, it included autism for the first time and found 1% of the population studied were autistic. The Department of Health then funded a project to build on the APM study and look more closely at the numbers of autistic adults that were not included in the original study. This included people in residential care settings and those with complex needs. Autism in adults. In the 21st century, autism research has continued to advance. In 2007, the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control, estimated that 1 in 150 children in the United States had autism. Today, that number has risen to 1 in 54. In 2013, the DSM-5 combined autism, Asperger's, and childhood disintegrative disorder into autism spectrum disorder. In 2014, the Autism Collaboration, Accountability, Research, Education, and Support, CARES Act, was signed into law by the President. As of 2020, the CDC has determined that 1 in 54 children have been identified with an autism spectrum disorder. Now, what causes autism? Autism is a neurobiological disorder influenced by both genetic and environmental factors affecting the developing brain. Ongoing research continues to deepen our understanding of potential etiological mechanisms in ASD, but currently no single unifying cause has been elucidated. Basically, the umbrella term is an umbrella term for a reason. Every individual is different when it comes to these situations, so kind of just knowing what to look for in terms of symptoms and behaviors is your best bet when diagnosing these individuals. Signs of autism. Restricted repetitive patterns or behavioral interests or activities. Symptoms must be present in the early developmental period, but may not become fully manifested until social demands exceed limited capacities or may be masked by learned strategies and later in life. Symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of current functioning. These disturbances are not better explained by intellectual disability or global developmental delay. Intellectual disability and autism spectrum disorder frequently co-occur to make comorbid diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability. Social communication should be below that expected for general developmental levels. Now we're going to discuss the levels of severity when it comes to autism spectrum disorder. The first level we're going to be discussing is known as mild disabilities. These individuals do not require a lot of help. They might need, to write down on a sticky note to do something. They're pretty good with their schedules. They can live alone. They can work a job. So that's what's called mild disabled. Then you have the next level, which is level 2, which is considered moderately disabled. This means that you still need a good amount of help. You might, like, you can't work a job. You can volunteer and do other things maybe, but you cannot work a job consistently, especially. Um, you may have to live with a caretaker, whether that be a family member or state provided one. You will more than likely have difficulties just cooking and cleaning dishes or cleaning up your room. And then there's level 3 of the severity of autism, which is the kid has to be completely redirected constantly. It's considered severe. So the child or the adult in question is constantly being recentered and being tried to redirect so they stop a lot of the behaviors. But unfortunately, that can be difficult as some of the kids, even as they aged, still have a lot to deal with. Some skills. So, individuals with autism have enhanced focus, imagination, creativity, superior recall and memory abilities, superior analytical abilities, positive outlook on life, and dedicated workers. Now we're going to take a look at some assistive technologies. So assistive technology can be defined as any item, piece, or equipment or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities of body text. These can be high or low tech. So low tech, we see things like pencil grips, adapted erasers, slant boards to write on, post-it sticky notes, a highlighter to put emphasis on whatever it is the person needs to do. They'll use fidgets, which can be a squishy ball. It can be one of these little things that's a character and you pop the hole through it. All that type of stuff. Tactical rulers are definitely something kids can use. Velcro is always amazing for these individuals, whether it's adults or younger kids. Velcro is always perfect. Page protector, colored transparency binder clip. Those are also really good ideas, especially if the teachers are needing to organize certain levels of work. That is always, always helpful. Mid-technology, so you'll see some sort of electrical device, a screen magnifier, audiobook adapted, like a CD player, which you never see anymore, or any type of music player. You'll see people with a voice amplification or a scooter, a gait trainer, a wheelchair, braille translation software, switched adapted games or toys, adapted switches, adapted seating like a bouncy ball or chair with seat belts, wiggly butt cushions. You'll see that they have adapted keyboards, a calculator, or word prediction software. This is a lot more mid-technology, and mid-technology is technology-based ideas that you don't see very much anymore. So there's definitely quite a few of these that you don't see anymore. Gait trainers and wheelchair stuff I know quite a bit about, and I've seen those still being used, so that's an interesting fact. And then high technology. Assisting technology used for support social robots which can become engaged to a certain extent in social interaction with humans through speech and gestures. So basically, this robot will literally engage with you quite a bit. Like, it'll talk with you. It could have, like, complete conversations and that sort of thing, as well as moving, so it could point to different things. Then there's assistive robots, which help people with special needs, and especially those with motor disabilities. Service robots, which can be designed to offer any kind of help a person may need. And then there are apps such as Face Say, as well as Magnus cards and Stories in Motion apps. Then you have what is called, or what I call, talker software from GoTalks, because they are a type of speech generating device that many nonverbal autistic individuals will use. So now we're looking at qualified professionals to diagnose autism. So one of the things that is definitely complicated with autism is making sure that you can actually get the diagnosis. And the people that diagnose it, or at the very least notice signs of the disorder, are pediatricians, neurologists, psychologists, as well as behavioral therapists or ABA therapists. Um, these people understand kids. They know what to look for when it comes to the disorder. They know what's considered different versus what's considered normal. So a lot of these individuals definitely help out. And now we're going to look at work accommodations. Individuals in the workforce, they could use noise canceling headphones, a fixed desk instead of a hot desk. Making sure they're always having a schedule so they always have something to do and not being left with their own devices. Quiet workspace so they're not easily distracted, as well as always telling them what they couldn't be fixing or what they shouldn't be doing. Now we're going to take a look at some treatments. So autism is not something you can just treat with a medication. A lot of it is mainly therapies, as especially family therapies in terms of caretaking and whatnot. So it's behavior and communication therapies, family therapies, speech to improve communication skills, OT to teach activities of daily living. So, maybe using a pair of scissors to cut things, PT to improve movement and balance. A psychologist can recommend ways to address problem behavior. That's definitely always something to look out for, especially as the kids start turning into teenagers. That's when things can get really messy. There's not really any medication to improve the core signs of autism, but there are other medications that you will see autistic individuals using, and that's because of the fact that they also have other underlying health issues, like they could have depression, they could have anxiety, they could have, all that kind of stuff going on with them. And if a child who is transitioning into a teenager starts exhibiting different signs than what you're used to, it's because the kid is trying to act up to see what they can get away with and just keep kind of going and doing what they want. And that is the end of my presentation, and these are all my references. Thank you for listening.